hello everyone, and welcome. My name is Leticia, and I am a registered social worker and psychotherapist here in Ontario, Canada. If you do not already subscribe to the newsletter, feel free to subscribe to my newsletter on LinkedIn, A Black Therapist Diary, which is focused on sharing some of my experiences as a therapist in Ontario, Canada, along with doing some mental health education around a variety of topics and subjects that may be of interest to some of my readers and viewers. As a therapist, I have a pretty anti-oppressive lens while using a systemic, psychodynamic, and trauma-informed approach while working with youth, young adults, couples. I have dedicated a lot of my life to advancing some practices in social equity and social justice. I've worked in diverse communities, and I love my work in social services and counseling. I have experiences in community mental health, private practice, healthcare, education, the list goes on. And I'm a firm believer that reconnecting our mind, body, and soul is a lifetime exploration that everybody absolutely has power over. So today we're going to be talking about a subject that is quite close to my heart, the pressures of being a second generation immigrant in Canada. And I will have a great friend and colleague and author and just an amazing human join me today to have a little bit of a conversation around, well, what are the pressures of being a second generation immigrant in this country? For those who don't know what a second generation immigrant is, it's basically if your parents have immigrated to Canada and you were either born here or you came here at a really, really young age, therefore you fully integrated to the Canadian culture. So there's a lot that goes into immigration as a whole, but even more that goes into it when you immigrated at a very young age or when you're born in here, especially when it comes to managing the different obligations that come with your culture of origin and the Canadian culture and how to integrate both, as well as the academic pressures, the mental health results from that, understanding what mental health is within the immigration process. So we'll definitely dive into a lot of that together today. And I'll welcome my guest next. All right, so we're here with Sylvan. And he'll be joining me today in the conversation around being a second generation immigrant living in Canada. We'll kind of dive into some of our experiences and talk about some of the pressures that came with it. So first, I want to let people just get to know you a little bit. So why don't you introduce yourself, Sylvan? Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us about where you're schooled, what you do, and then we'll kind of get into more of the deeper conversations about our topic today.
Yeah, sure thing, Leticia. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me here. So my name is Sylvan Khater. It's an Arabic last name. I am a second-generation immigrant from Lebanon. I studied at University of Ottawa. My degree it's a double major in economics and political science. Currently, I work for Shared Services Canada during the day. I'm an HR strategic advisor. So essentially, the job involves providing input and, let's say, political input and advice and long-term strategy when it comes to networking, communicating, even some learning stuff to executives, managers, and even just regular employees on a corporate level. But I also participate in some of the diversity and inclusion elements there at Shared Services Canada. I also I'm a co-owner of a restaurant with my father, so we run a restaurant. It's called House of Pizza, a typical second generation business there. But it's a restaurant in Westboro. We've been open since 2020. I work there almost every day. It's a good endeavor, and I also opened recently. Last year, a small business of mine, like an online business. It's called Writing Labs, and the work is essentially resume editing and essay editing as well. And we're moving on to LMS soon, me and a new potential partner. I've also written a couple of books. They're not that good. If they were good, then you'd know about me. I'd be more famous. But
they're great.
These books that I wrote, they're philosophical. For the most part, they talk about ethics. They talk about civil society. So one of them is a political book. One of them is a much more spiritual book, let's say, for lack of a better term. And I'm still working on other stuff on the side. So this is the summary of me. I'm a person who works and writes. That's my hobby. And yeah, I guess that's it, Leticia.
Well, you know what? I think you're selling yourself short because I know Sylvan, and Sylvan and I went to high school together, and he has always been a hustler, which we'll get into. And I explained to people what second generation immigrant kind of meant. Either it means that, your parents immigrated into this country. For you, they came from Lebanon, and perhaps what usually happens is you're either born here and you're kind of raised into the Canadian culture, or you came here at a really, really young age and had to grow up here as well. So were you born here or were you born in Lebanon?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I was born here. I was born and raised here. I have been to Lebanon, though, like many times. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of those overall experiences as an immigrant child in this country, but more specifically, within that role of, okay, I'm a second generation here. My parents immigrated from Lebanon, but I'm born here. What did that entail for you from the moment from as far as you can remember, obviously?
Yeah, that's something actually that kind of when I first thought about it is like, I most of us, how do I put it? We don't really know that we exist until we're like 4 or 5 years old, right? That's when we like have our first memories. And for me, one of my earliest memories was when I was taken down to Lebanon, like for the first time. So this was an integral part of like my childhood, is having this memory. Even if I didn't understand what it was at the time, it was having this memory as a 4-year-old in another country with, family. And I put family like this because I didn't know anyone, right? I didn't understand any of it. But it was important for me to have that experience when I was only 4 years old, because I grew up after that, let's say 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, until I was 11 was the time after. So there was like an 8-year period between when I first traveled to Lebanon and when I went again as a teenager, basically almost 12 years old, right? And it's important that we had this initial experience, because I would not have truly connected the identity of being like Lebanese to who I am as a Canadian, because I was born and raised in this country and I don't even speak proper Arabic. To me, English is my first language, French is my second language. And when people ask me, or at least back then and still now, when they ask me what I am, I always identify as Canadian first. Mm-hmm. So that was...
But you don't look it.
I don't look it. It's very true. And I am a visible minority, as they say. And, growing up from there, obviously all of us when we're young and we're teenagers, we're still kids, right? So I didn't quite understand what it meant to have like this background. All I knew is that there's a culture, there's different foods that we eat at home. My mom, she cooks different foods than your mother or than a Canadian, a white Canadian mother would cook. And, we'd go to parties hosted by the Lebanese community, but I didn't know what it meant. It didn't mean anything until really recently, until after I had graduated high school and actually began developing as a person, that I began to appreciate the fact that I am both Lebanese and Canadian. I don't look like I'm white. I'm clearly from the Middle East. I look Arab, but I have a very Western mentality due to the fact that I was born and raised in this country, and that makes me different from Lebanese people when I go there to Lebanon. So whenever I go to visit my friends in the village, last time I went was 2018. It's been hard the past 4 years due to COVID-19 and so on and work. So whenever I would go to Lebanon to visit my friends and my family there, they'd call me the Canadian. But when I'm here in Canada, they call me the Lebanese guy. So which one am I?
Can't win.
Can't win. But you know what? I'm happy to be both. It's been a very good experience. I don't know if I answered your original question, to be honest. I'm kind of going on now.
No, you did, because a lot of the times, and I can reflect with your story, with my story a little bit when it comes to identity. I find that when we talk about second generation immigration, the first thing that comes to my mind is identity. And for my readers and now viewers, I think I've told my story a little bit, but I wasn't born here. But I feel like a generation immigrant. Why? Because I came here at a really, really young age and I had to quickly adapt to the Canadian system. And if I didn't grow up those first few years back in Cameroon and Africa, I don't think that I would have connected to my African culture at all. Like you said, I think that there's components when you're at home, we ate different foods, we listened to different musics. We had a Cameroonian community that we could go and visit, or just broader African community that we could, kind of chime with and have fun with and things like that. So in that sense, I knew that I was Cameroonian by culture, but I didn't know by identity that I was Cameroonian if I hadn't spent, a little bit of those years back in Cameroon before I came here. And for the most part, we don't look Canadian, obviously. I think, we're not native for one. And second, we're not, Caucasian. So a lot of the times when you do identify with Canadianship and you say that, all they want to tell you is, well, where are you actually from? So there's always that extra question that you have to answer to no matter what. But then if you go back home, if I was, to go back to Cameroon, I stand out like I don't know what the expression is, but I stand out even if I look like them. So it's like, well, I'm like stuck between, two places. And like you said, like, I feel comfortable with it, but I think it's the people around me and the people that I have to, deal with on a daily basis that are not comfortable with that. Which drives me to my next question, which is, did you ever feel stuck between the two cultures? And like, how did you navigate that? Or how do you continue to navigate that? Because I don't think it'll be something that'll never just end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did feel stuck until I realized that I like to be there, So if I'm stuck somewhere, but I enjoy being there, I'm not really stuck. I'm choosing to be there. I could very quickly choose to abandon my Lebanese identity, even if I don't look like it. I can stay here, and the second and third and fourth generation after me, you won't even tell that they're Lebanese. They'll be fully Canadian at that point. Or I can choose to abandon the Canadian identity, go back to Lebanon, settle down there. And my great-grandchildren, they won't even know that their great-grandfather was some kid who grew up in Canada. I can choose that if I want to, but I how do I deal with it? How do I put it? It's like I'm comfortable with both. I no longer feel like I'm targeted. When the Lebanese tell me, back home, when they tell me like, oh, you're born and raised in Canada, tell them, yes, I am, and I'm proud to be so. Here's what I have from Canada that I can make your country better. Here's what I have from the Canadian culture that can make the Lebanese culture more enhanced, and vice versa. There are some things that, and I think it's not just for the Lebanese community. I think it's for every immigrant community. There's a reason why we have Little Italy and we have Chinatown and right here in Ottawa, where I live. There's a reason why these communities exist, because this large influx, this big community is coming from another country. And clearly Canada is a better country than where we're coming from. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Canada is a better country. It is one of the best, if not the best countries in the world, and for good reason. And there's a lot to learn from it. There's a lot that us as immigrants or our parents have to learn from this country and from this Western society, whether we like it or not at first. But at the same time, there are things from our own countries that we can bring along with us and not only adapt them, but also maintain them, maintain a little fire, let's say, over the generations. And then the rest that's not good can disappear. So me as a second generation immigrant, I'm not as Lebanese as my parents, but to be honest, I'm happy. I'm happy with that because there are things from that country that my parents inherited, they brought with them, which are not good. They grew up in war and a terrible economy. They grew up with bombs, like my mom's house, her childhood house was burned down by a bomb, like stuff like this, and the aggression and the violence and the inability to have civil discourse and democracy doesn't exist, not even to this day. I'm giving a very broad example here, a very general example, but things like this, I now inherit them, which my parents did not have at first, right? So that makes my dual identity better. So it's not so much like I'm stuck, but rather I'm choosing to adopt both of them. I'm choosing to take what's good from one identity, from one culture, and what's good from the other one, and then to combine them. And this is what really the future of Canada and the future of the West looks like. It's going to be a combination of all our different cultures and the best of these different cultures. Whatever is bad, whatever is rotten, it'll eventually die out from every culture. If not now, then in the next generation or the generation after. So that in the end, it's like a combination of all the good things that the world has over time, all these different civilizations and societies and cultures have over time, combine into what is in the future a very nice, new Canadian identity.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that what you just mentioned and explained so beautifully really resonates. Um, personally speaking, I'm grateful enough to have three generations, present in Canada: grandparents, my parents, and myself. And in terms of feeling stuck, I love your perception of, well, we're only stuck if we envision ourselves in that space of feeling stuck. For me personally, when I look at the role that my parents played in my identity and my life, and sort of me incorporating both of those cultures, I think one of the things that I find the most difficult is dealing with them. Not necessarily dealing with my internal identity and reconciling that, but it's dealing with the external components to what has helped me identify and create my own identity. And I'll give you a more specific example of in situations where perhaps I might feel stuck and have to navigate my way through it. When you're dealing with your parents or your grandparents, in my case, they might view something in a very specific way. When we talk about more traditional things like marriage and employment and, genderized rules and things like that, or even the LGBTQ community, like really like greater concepts and things that in our cultures, we both know that we don't talk about, or, they're very rigid about. So that's one side. And then the other side is the Canadian culture where, I have to go to work every day and deal with people that don't necessarily fully accept me. And this is just my experience. I live in Belleville. I'm not in Ottawa. It's not as diverse, perhaps. So I'm in a very small town that's predominantly white, predominantly conservative, and I stand out like flashlights. Like everybody knows me in town as like, I'm the Black social worker, I'm the Black therapist, which is hard to hide from. And I take full responsibility for that, and I can live with that, and I'm fine with that, but it doesn't take away from some of those pressures that I end up feeling, because I feel like I'm representing my whole race. I'm representing my whole culture every time I leave my house. So it's like I have to adapt so many pieces of myself to fit in a little bit with this Canadian culture and what these Canadian people want from people that look like me. And then I have to go, every time I have to go home or deal with, an elder, I have to also adapt myself to know how to deal with them and deal with. So in me, in myself, I can find balance, right? Like if I'm in the corners, if I'm in the four walls of my house, I'm living my life with my friends, my work and things like, I can find balance. But the moment that I have to interact with these other parties, I feel like that's when at moments I might feel stuck. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%.
Do you ever feel like you have to live within those bounds?
Yes, for sure. Like my dad's friends. Okay, my dad has a lot of friends. They're all old timer Lebanese guys in their 50s. It's like I have to kind of sometimes I have to put on a mask, and I don't mind it because it is part of me. But like I have to kind of abandon the Canadianness within me, and vice versa. When I'm with like 100% Canadian people, I have to abandon the fact that I don't look like them. So that I can fit in. It's fine. Like I kind of like it. I kind of like it because I'm a bit of both.
You enjoy it? You're like, oh,
I enjoy it. I'm a bit of both. I can listen to the Lebanese drum music. I can play their drum, the tabl, and I can listen to hard rock music. I'm as white as they come. From the 1970s, pop rock, all that stuff, punk rock. I'm not joking. It's good music. So it is what it is. I like hockey and I like soccer. Volleyball, basketball, all the sports that the Lebanese people are good at. Yeah. Like, I'm just giving you random examples of music and sports, but like, I have a Canadian breakfast. I'll go to Denny's or whatever. I'll eat a Western breakfast. And the day after, my mom will make me a manushib za'atar, the stuff from Farhats when we were in,
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? When we were at high school? Yeah, man. Like, I'll have that one day. The day after, I'll have bacon and eggs. I don't care.
But honestly, I think it is the best of both worlds. I think it comes with its pressures and challenges, but I think it also comes with the diversity of the mind and our cognitive abilities to, mold into these different parts of ourselves. And I don't think that it's necessarily about, oh, I'm giving up a part of me for something else. I think it's I'm integrating the two. And I think that that's the beauty of it. What I don't like to see happening, and this is just a personal opinion, is I don't like to see people assimilating culture. I think there's a very big difference between integrating into a culture and assimilating to them, because a lot of the times you can see it, and I will say this because it happens with, the younger the generations get, the more our parents give up on like passing down some of our original culture. I see it with my siblings, me and my last sibling were like 20 years apart. And I don't even think he knows that Cameroon is a country. Like, it's just, so even in terms of the effort that, our parents would make with us to make sure that we understood where we came from, I think it's getting lost over time. And I think that they're now assimilating to the Canadian culture. And quite frankly, that scares me a little bit. I don't know if that's just me, but it does. I don't want us to necessarily lose who we originally are and our parts of ourselves to assimilate to something. I think it's okay to integrate. Sorry, but I don't think it's okay to assimilate. I don't know what you think, but that's my
I agree with
opinion.
this point. I agree with this point. I wanted to go back to something I mentioned earlier about that fire, right? There's this quote. I don't know if I came up with it or someone else did. I don't remember. I know so many quotes. But it says that tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. And applying this to our conversation right now, when you assimilate, as you're saying, you're getting rid of that fire. There's no more distinguishment. There's no more difference between light and darkness. But at the same time, right? Some of the fire that's there is a bad fire. Let's say it's a dirty fire with dirty oxygen or whatever. It's a terrible metaphor. But anyway, you want to keep the good stuff and integrate it, as you're saying, right? And so in this case, it's like, for example, we have a community here in Ottawa, which my father participated in. He led it for 8 years, and it's part of a wider Canadian community. It's called the Lebanese Friends of Canada, right? And what this community is, it's semi-political, let's say, but it's really just a group of Lebanese citizens who vote, let's say, on certain things in Lebanon, but they exist only here in Canada, and they coordinate with Canadian MPs. They talk to the Prime Minister, they talk to the premiers of Ontario, Quebec, whatever, right? Like we associate. I say we because I'm a member of it. We associate with Canadian entities. Canadian politicians, diplomats, so on, but on behalf of our native culture, let's say. So to me, this is what integration is. It's like we're keeping where we're from. We're not forgetting where we came from, but we're also not ignoring where we're heading towards. So we're not ignoring the fact that we are now in another country that has power to help us back home. At the same time, it is also our new home, right? And so it's like, for example, I would take the role of being a mediator, let's say, on behalf of the Lebanese people within Canada. But why would I put the effort if I didn't trust that Canada is the right place to do it, right? Assimilation would be like forgetting the Lebanese thing and just, it's Canadian, whatever, this is the future. But like basically, integration is you remember where you came from, you respect where you came from, you maintain some of that fire, right, in my metaphor, while also accepting that it has moved to a new place, right? And that, again, at the end of the day, this is a successmal civilization for a reason, right? Maybe it has its own history of this might be a bit controversial, right? But like the West, the European powers conquered the world. And of course, there's a lot of bad things that happen, but they also spread some ideas, some practices, which we can all benefit from, right? And so integrating our own, what's the word, exotic cultures into these Western practices, right? This is like
because there's beauty in it.
There's beauty. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe I'm not wording it properly, but like there's beauty in both, right? And what you said about assimilation versus integration, I agree with 100%. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it's all about integration for me personally, and this is what I also look at, like for the future, for future immigrants. I'm hoping that they take the path of integration, not assimilation, because Canada has potential to give back to the country that you came from, while also the country that you came from giving to Canada. I'm going to stop talking
Absolutely.
now. But yeah,
No,
I agree
I
with
think
you.
it
Is
makes
what
a
I'm
lot of
saying.
sense. It
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm going to send this to African politicians because they're
yeah,
missing the
yeah,
mark on many things. They're
yeah,
missing the
exactly.
mark on many things. And I think that we all get to a point where, and I talk about this a lot within, my African friend circle. We get to a point where it's no longer about what the Western people did. Like, I feel like I'm tired of talking about, oh, well, they colonized us and da 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 da.
Mhm.
You're absolutely right. I think that when trauma happens, whether it's intergenerational trauma, acute trauma, chronic trauma, it doesn't really matter. I think that it's not about forgetting about what happened, right? But it already happened. It's not going to change, right? Like we can't go back and change the way that the world started and who was a slave and who wasn't, and we're absolutely still living the effects of it. But I always try to get people to use language in a way that is empowering and not that is victimizing, because it gets us stuck in a place where we can't move forward. And I do this both individually with my clients, but also on a larger scale, because when bad things happen to us, they're not excuses to continue into bad behaviors, or behaviors that are harmful or unhealthy for us individually or as a community. It can be a reason, right? Because everything explains everything, right? 1 + 1 = 2. When this happens, this is most likely to happen. There's correlation between things. And there's absolutely a correlation between our history and why we're stuck in the things that we're stuck in today. Absolutely. It is a reason, but it is not an excuse, right? I think
Absolutely.
that a lot of and I can only speak from African, because that's my culture and that's what I can relate to, but I'm sure that it extends to many um, many minorities around the world, where it's like, well, at what point do we stop using this as an excuse and actually look at ways that we can learn and grow from all of these other cultures that are obviously doing something right, and integrate our own into it to make it our own and to make it beautiful, because there is beauty in the things that our parents went through, and the things that our grandparents went through, and the things that we went through, right? Things like the fact that there's still not 24/7 electricity in most African countries. That's like mind blowing to me. I'm just like,
Yeah,
why are we not, why are we not learning from other countries that are advanced in that notion, and invest in the things that we need to invest in to make our nation better? And of course, we can get into corruption and politics and all that. We all know it plays a big role into, some of those reasons, but anyways, let's pivot a little bit, because I think one of the big things that I hear a lot, both from personal experience and others around me, was the role academics played in our lives as students, and those experiences within the education system, and how it earlier on in life shaped our ideas of what failure and success were. So, why don't you get me like oriented a little bit on what you think the role of academics played in your life and in your upbringing, and how it kind of shaped your ideas around failure and success?
this is a good question, because I don't know how to answer it.
I know, I wrote it.
Very good question, but like, I'll just go back in time, and I'll talk from my own experience, and maybe an answer will show up.
Mm-hmm.
So, my parents, they told us, we came from a bad country. We're giving you now an opportunity. We're working hard now for you. We're working nonstop for you now to have a better education and get a better career than us. So academics was important to them. Getting good grades was important to them, not so that they can see an A+ or 100% or whatever, 99% on their report card, but because it is a sign that in the future I will end up being accepted by a good university. I'll get a scholarship, and I'll go study something, get a degree, possibly even go further than that and get a good paying job.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't quite, to be honest, I don't know how to answer the question. It's a strong question, but the academics, if I understand what you're asking, is like, did the academics, did it affect the experience as a second generation immigrant? Is that what you're asking, I guess? So like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it did, because it was connected to the the fact that my parents had to start from nothing, and they didn't want us to live the same life. If I didn't do good in school, if I didn't go to university, I'd be starting from nothing again. Well, yeah, but I'd be starting from nothing. But
what'd you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, like when I was a baby, my hands are still small, but when I was a baby, they were like this, little tiny, and my dad's hand was huge, and he'd say, "Put out your hand." He'd go like this, That was the hand version of the belt. This is what happens if the teacher calls saying your son was being annoying today at school.
They'll even stop and be like, "What son? Are you sure it's mine?"
Yeah, it's good. I got in trouble a few times at school, and I got in more trouble at home for it. But it's part of discipline. And my parents being hard on me is not unique at all. All the second generation immigrants I know, all of them, their parents were hard on them when it came to school. But you know what? It's for the better. It's for the better. It's because at the end of the day, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine us right now. I'm 24. I had to move to a new country and start from zero and work like a dog, to be honest. And my degree meant nothing. Nothing that I studied, nothing I did meant anything. And then I got married in that country and I raised children. I wouldn't want them to go through the same thing as well. So I tell them, yeah, take your education seriously, because in the world that we live in, this is an important part of getting a good job and being successful in your career. I honestly don't know if I answered the question or not, but that's my experience.
No, I think we're getting into the nitty gritty of it. But do you think some of those pressures to succeed academically, do you think they were always like spoken? Do you think some of it was just like, oh, this is just what we have to do? Like, was any part of it just an internalized notion that you had for yourself?
Yes, actually, that's true. It was internalized. It was spoken, but it was also internalized. It's like I became hard on myself. There was an internal, I had to kind of validate to myself, not just to my parents, but I came to a point where if I did bad on an exam or on a test, it wasn't out of fear for them anymore. It was actually just disappointment in myself. It's like, okay, I can do better than this. And especially knowing that, to be honest, in the country where they came from, in Lebanon, the education system there is harder. And they studied during a war, right? And so in a harder education system, for them to be at the top of the class, and then for me to be not at the top of the class in a lower system, it's embarrassing for me more than it is for them,
Isn't that crazy how, like, I remember I came here, I was like 8 years old, and I remember some of the things they were learning in class, because I came grade 3? Like, I went to class and I was like, I did this shit 2 years ago. Like, I was just like, what is this? And funny enough, like, they were...
Do you remember our friend Ali?
Yes.
He came in grade 11. Okay, he came, and by the way, I saw him like last week, a couple of weeks ago. He showed up at my restaurant. He's like, "Oh, hi, brother." Anyway, I haven't seen him like 7 years. So I love this guy, right? He came in grade 11, and the math we were doing, he's like, "What is this? This is a joke." He's like,
"It was a joke."
And I was like, "Man, come on! I used to be the smartest guy in the class. You're making me look like shit." But yeah, because
he made all of us look like shit.
Because he was studying that stuff 4 years earlier. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why, like, obviously not succeeding in school, not doing well academically, was not only disappointing to my parents, but also to me. Is like, what the heck? What am I going to amount to?
Yeah. And I mean, to a certain extent, and I definitely feel those pressures. I feel like a lot of it didn't need to be spoken. I don't know if you did, but I saw my parents struggle, like visually. We're 4 siblings in total, and my mom had them a little bit spread out. So it's not all throughout my life that I had all 4 siblings, but we were still many children at home. I saw my dad struggle, had to go back to school. Like, we've all been through those experiences of coming to this country, not having our education validated, having to start from scratch, and sometimes very educated people that come from abroad, are being told, oh, no, you'll do well, you'll find a job, and then having to start from zero comes with its own pressures. But I feel like some of it didn't have to be, I didn't need to be told. I saw my parents struggle on a daily basis. I saw my dad work 3 jobs. I saw my mom, I went to food banks with my mom when I was throughout high school. We went to food banks because it was so tough. So there was a lot of times where it didn't need to be spoken. I think that when you understand what it means to struggle, and to have to fight for everything you have and everything you earn, it just comes as a second nature of something you have to internalize as, well, if academics is a path where I can at least make sure my parents don't have to worry, then I'm going to do that. Right. But I think also by doing that, and I speak for me, I was good in school. I mean, we were both good in school, at least from what I can remember. We never really weren't one of those kids that, we didn't have a learning disability. We didn't struggle in school and things like that. So I thank God for that we were blessed to just be good in school. But it did change the fact that I struggled with perfectionism. And a lot of people didn't know it because I just had like a whatever attitude and I was very social. But I had to, in university, it really hit me. Like I had a perfectionist attitude. Why? Because I just wanted to make sure that I was one less thing for my parents to worry about, which I succeeded at because now they're sitting peacefully at home and they're proud of the things I've accomplished. But I had to do a lot of damage work on me because the only person that I was hurting so much by doing that was me. Right. And it really fucked up my ideas of what failure and success were because I didn't allow myself to fail in order to succeed. I always thought that I had to do everything right because that's what success was. Because I saw my parents fail so much and how painful that was to watch and be a part of and not be able to have the things people had and not be able to live the life people lived and sort of associating failure to that. I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like I'm like rambling a little bit, but
you're making absolute sense. Like, see, I didn't know how to answer your question, but now you answer on my behalf. Like I grew up, the first 15 years of my life, I saw my dad maybe once a week because of how much he was working. So I understand 100%. And deep down, that's I feel the same way. I'm trying to not disappoint them, but not just that. I want to relieve them a bit. I'm trying to help my parents now. They carried me into this world. I want to carry them to the next life, right? That's what I told my mom the other day. She's like, will you stay with us when we get older? I told her, absolutely. I'm not going to leave you. After everything I've seen you go through, I will not live with myself. I will not sleep peacefully, consciously, ethically. It's wrong for me to not now work to do what my parents did for me when I was a baby, to now do it for them and for my future family, hopefully.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you carry some of that mentality onto post-secondary, like education?
To be honest, yes, but even then, like I think I matured in this subject very late, until after I had finished my degree, maybe even just a couple of years ago, until I started thinking like this about my parents and about the future.
Well, I think that we all go through these life developmental changes as well, and we start rationalizing things a little bit differently because it's time to rationalize them that way. But higher education was such an important pillar in my world. I don't know the level of education that your parents, had, but, on the topic of academics, my parents are highly educated people. Like my mom has like a gazillion degrees. So does my dad. And my dad actually went back to school when I was a teenager to complete his engineering degree. And I had a lot of respect from my parents when it came to academics and education. So there was also like our internal family culture of achieving higher education is like, it's not it's compulsory. Like this is not something that we have to like discuss or talk about. So for one, achieving it wasn't like a big deal. Like I don't know how to explain it, but graduating university, it wasn't like, oh my God. It was just like, this is what you're supposed to do. I don't understand. We're supposed to celebrate you because you went to school. Like it's just, so that's one. Culturally speaking, like as a second, like it's an expectation to succeed to that level. Like it wasn't an exploit. Like it wasn't like anything to be like, oh my God, put on the wall kind of thing. And second, what I've realized is that once you reach post-secondary, I don't know why I've always felt this way, but I felt like I had to work harder because the people that I had to compete with did not come from the same place I did. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does.
Like in the program that I was in, obviously becoming a social worker, I was surrounded by like 4% of therapists in Canada are Black. And like maybe 2% of them are actually African. I'm not saying Black in like a larger term, or I should say BIPOC. They put it in a BIPOC category, but I was surrounded by a bunch of white girls who like went to Punta Cana like on March break, you know, and I was in a very stressful program where we did a lot of non-paid internships. I had to do internships like 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week. I had to work 25 hours a week. I was taking care of my grandmother. I was driving back and like my life was busy, but I felt like I had to go above and beyond. Like even in university where grades don't matter as much because you get a degree, you get a degree. But I still felt like, no, if I don't get a 4.0 GPA, I'm failing somewhere, you know? And I felt like a part of that pressure was because I felt like I was competing to be better than what people around me thought I could achieve. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
It does, yeah, absolutely.
what do you think the place of like religion played in your life growing up in Canada? When we talk about culture, I feel like one piece of it is religion. I think we're both pretty in tune with that, with the way that we grew up. But why don't you elaborate a little bit more on like religion and sort of that heritage and how it played a role in your life growing up?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
Or tell us
especially
your religion first. I feel like people
well,
should know.
well, yeah. So where I'm from, you know, the religion is part of the identity. So just to say that I'm Lebanese isn't enough anymore. I'm Catholic from my father's side, and I'm Orthodox from my mom's side. But from my father's side, the type of Catholic is not just Roman Catholic; it's not Western.
I just want to pause a second for the
Yeah,
people that are listening in. Yes, there are people that are Arab that are Christian. Continue.
yeah. See, this, by the way, like I was called like a terrorist when I was bullied
Yeah,
as
believe me, this is something that a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I want to generalize it because I don't want to just say, oh, it's the dominant majority that doesn't know. But the minute somebody thinks, oh, he's Arab, oh, he must be Muslim. No, like the
yeah.
two don't go together, right?
Yeah,
So I
and
just wanted to clarify that.
the fact that they call it the Muslim world as well is not fair, right? Because you know, Lebanon itself as a country exists because of the Maronite Catholics. So the Maronite, not Mennonite, it's a big difference. People like to confuse us with Mennonites. Like, no, Habibi, no. Maronite named after Saint Maron, one of our saints, like 1500 years ago. So it's like an order, but our patriarch, so the head of our church, is a cardinal in Rome. So we're in line with the Catholic Church. And the Maronite community in Lebanon, living in the Mount Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley and that area, is why Lebanon actually exists as a country and is not part of like Syria or even part of Palestine, Israel, whatever, you know.
Yeah,
The
man.
reason the country exists is because of this Maronite Catholic community that maintained a bit of a separation, like very similar cultures to the Syrians and the Palestinians around us, but still a unique identity due to the fact that they were Christian. Now, obviously, Lebanon today is a mix of so many different religions, majority being the Maronites, us, right? And then the Druze, another sect. And then you have Sunni and Shia Muslims there. And, you know, these are all my brethren, you know, we're all we're all members of the same country. That's how I look at it now. But religion naturally had to play a big role for me as a second generation immigrant because the war that my parents left in started out because of religion. The Lebanese civil war that broke out because of conflicts between, like, I'm not going to go into details, you know, you can read all about it. I don't want to talk about it, but it started out because of conflicts between Christians and Muslims in that area. And so my parents left that country at a time when the Christians were fighting themselves. They had fought the Muslims, and then they started fighting each other, and that's when they left. A lot of Lebanese left. My parents, they didn't know each other at the time. They met here in Ottawa. They married here in Ottawa. So, you know, we're coming from a country where religion had been the source, in a way, of our war, of our struggle. And they want us to maintain to remember it because it's part of the identity, the struggle, the cause, al-adiyya, as they say in Arabic. It has to do with not just Lebanon, but with the Lebanese Maronite, you know, community that we were members of, that we fought and died with. I have two uncles who died during the war, fighting in this war. They you know, and I have other relatives and people in the village who fought in this war and who died in this war. So, your question was about the religion, but for specifically for the Lebanese community, it's a very deep and very specific question, because the war was for religion. Whereas, let's say, if you go and talk about Rwandans and the Rwandan genocide, and you ask them about their religion as a second generation immigrant, they will, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, but my understanding is that they will talk to you about, Hutu and Tutsis and their ethnicities more so than their religion. Whereas for us, for the Lebanese, it's not like, oh, Arab or non-Arab or whatever they like to call each other. It's, are you Christian or are you Muslim? So absolutely, it played a big role. And here in Ottawa, we have three, maybe four actually now, but three major Lebanese churches. And the one that we go to is called like the Saint Charbel Maronite Church. It's in Vanier, okay? And this church is the church that I was baptized in, is the church that I had my first communion in, is the church that my brother was married in and I was his best man. It's our church, it's our community church, and we know everyone there, right? And so now the connection to the community is like, we're members of this Lebanese Christian church and not just members of the Lebanese community. Now, of course, I have Lebanese Muslim friends, and I don't discriminate, right? And we don't do that to each other anymore. We're living in a better country now. This is what I was talking about before. We're in a country now where we don't need to discriminate. It doesn't matter anymore what the religion is. But still, it clings to me. It's natural. There's a natural inclination towards the Lebanese Christian community because that's where we're coming from.
Absolutely.
So yeah, to answer the question.
No, and I think that you beautifully explained that, because I think a lot of people don't know this history. And like I said, history is not an excuse to being, the worst versions of ourselves. I think it's a reason. I think that it's good to be able to dive into those parts of ourselves and to educate others as well. Religion does play a big role for us growing up. And just for the viewers watching, like, we went to a Catholic school, and I think that we took that seriously more than some of the people that were there just because it was a school. They didn't care about the religion attached to it.
Very true.
we called them haram a few times. But, on a more spiritual level, and now, like, the way I look at religion is I put spirituality first. I put faith first. I don't care whether you're a Buddhist or Jew or Muslim, or it doesn't really matter to me. At the end of the day, I put spirituality first. And I think that it's something that, at least for me growing up, has been a big source of peace, a big source of calm. I feel like it's not everything you see that you must cling on to. And I think faith is one of those things that nobody sees it. Nobody can touch it. It's yours. Right. And I think that I saw religion take both my parents and myself through very, very difficult times in our lives, because one, it created community. Absolutely. When you go to, till this day, there's a priest that we had met, a Nigerian priest, and he had made us feel so at home and such a sense of community in that church that no matter how many times we've moved over the years, we're still connected to him. So I think religion does things like that. And I think you meet amazing people along the way with whom you share those same beliefs, you share those same experiences, whether it's the same religion or not, but you share faith, you share spirituality, and you understand how deep and how important it is to share that. So I definitely think that it's part, until now, I mean, even now as an adult, I think it's part of the things that bring me a lot of peace, to get up in the morning and to pray and to just be happy to be alive, and to be breathing. And that gratitude alone, I believe that you prophesize the things that you say and do in your life. And I think gratitude is a great way of prophesizing or opening doors for greatness or opening doors for gifts. I feel like even if God has something for you, if you're not ready to receive it, you won't see it and you won't accept it in your life. So I think that is Amen. Such a great, it's a great strength. I'm going to put it that way. It's a great strength. Tell me, and feel free to share as much or as little as you want, but have you ever kind of struggled with your mental health throughout all of these experiences? And if you did, what did it look like? And what did you have to do to thrive through it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did struggle with it. Now, if you mean regarding being like a second generation immigrant, I don't think per se it had to do with that, but just as a human being, right? Yeah, like I've been depressed before. I know what it is to be depressed. I've gotten out of it. I did it without medication. I did it through faith. I prayed,
Mm-hmm.
and I prayed my rosary. You know, I'm a believer. I'm a Catholic believer, so I prayed my rosary, and I got out of it. And I said, you know, Lord, your hands before mine. That's how I dealt with my mental health problems. I've
Mm-hmm.
had them. Even now, I still sometimes catch myself with my thoughts. They're running places, and that's kind of the thing, is that thoughts sometimes they take control of the mind, and it's very awkward to say it. And you obviously know about this because you studied this stuff. But you know,
I
thoughts,
think it too.
thoughts. They're the
Very
mind itself.
powerful.
The mind is supposed to control the rest of you, but the mind itself needs to be controlled as well. Is what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with this, and I still do. I still do. There are days where I go to people who I care about, and I lash out at them for something that they had nothing to do with, but just because I had a shitty day. And it's part of my own mental health struggle, because I feel like shit afterwards for doing that. I feel terrible. And I say, damn, like, why did I let my thoughts throughout the day go like this in my head, go like this, and dirty my mind, so that I go and I release it. I release this junk onto people who don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a cause and a consequence of depression.
Mm-hmm.
Now, regarding, you know, second generation, as a second generation immigrant, part of it actually was related to that. I wanted to for a long time. Now I overcame that desire, but there was a period of time, like a 2 year period, where I desperately wanted to go to Lebanon just to go hike in the village and to breathe the air that's there. I feel like it was different than the air that I have here in Ottawa, the vibe, as they say, the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
everything. And the fact that I wasn't able to do that made things a bit worse. And I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of, sorry, I put this thing, fella. I was kind of connecting my own happiness to that ability
Mm-hmm.
to go back to that area in my village and be there. So I was connecting
Mm-hmm.
my happiness to a place, instead
Mm-hmm.
of saying like happiness is right now and the journey that I'm on. I was connecting it to a destination. And I know this is
Mm-hmm.
very cliche, but that's what I was doing a few years ago when I was in that stage of depression. I was connecting my
Mm-hmm.
happiness and saying, I'm not happy here in Canada. I'm not happy here in Ottawa. I don't like this country. But you see, I
Mm-hmm.
ate shit, and I learned a big lesson in that right now, you know, I should be grateful for everything that I have. And I am absolutely grateful. And everything
Mm-hmm.
happens for a reason. Nothing is finished. And we must make the best of what is in our hands, right? And then let
Mm-hmm.
God do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, dude, to answer the original question, I struggled with mental health for sure. And faith is what helped me. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, yeah, it's good that I had that church. You know, it's good that I had that Saint Charbel church, because I would go there. I'd sit in the very back, and it was a comforting place for me. I couldn't go to any
Mm-hmm.
other church. Now I go to other churches, very chill.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of
Mm-hmm.
nice Western churches I go to every now and then. I alternate, but for me, you know, for me, my comfort place was sitting in the back of my Lebanese church and just
Mm-hmm.
listening to the priest's sermon and praying there quietly. That was part of what helped me, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it felt like home. It's so funny you talk about wanting to leave Canada because I definitely went through that same phase right before COVID. I literally was about to pack my bags and move. I was just like,
Yeah.
let me get out of here. I need something new. I need something
Right
else.
before
I need
COVID.
to
Right before COVID.
right
Absolutely.
before COVID. And then I was like, if this is not God telling me to shut up and just sit here for a second and take life in, I don't know what
Right.
is. I was literally like, I was finishing my master's, I was ready to travel, and I'm not necessarily back home, but I knew to like, and this is the part where I say to people that happiness is a state of mind. It's not a place, it's not a destination, it's not, it's not a person, it's a state of mind, and it's not chasing happy emotions either. There's a difference between your state of mind, which is happiness, and being happy, right? Happy is an emotion. We don't feel emotions for longer than 30 seconds, right? Like whether you're sad, you're hurt, you're disappointed, you're frustrated, you're angry, you can feel it over a period of time, but emotions come and go, right? So if you're chasing happy emotions, you're constantly in a chase for something greater. So you're never really satisfied with life as is and taking it in as is. And, to help you with the thoughts, and this is just a sidebar, because it's something that a lot of people will struggle with, like in general, because our mind is like this incredible machine. But if you don't develop the ability to cognitively, be resilient, or at least to have power over your own thoughts and power over your own mind, it can really debilitate you. And the greatest way to have power over your mind is to connect it to your body. A lot of the times, and I will say this, and I will make this about gender, I think men do this more than women do, is that you stay in your head. Why? Because women are just more emotionally wired when it comes to certain things. And I think men get stuck in their head a lot of the times. And this can happen for anybody, obviously, but it's just what we know to be a correlation. And one of the greatest tips I can give to people out there struggling with that is you need to learn to connect the mind to what's in your heart. Not just to, oh, I have to figure out a way to think this through and think. Find a way to stop thinking so much and feel more. Because if you feel more what you're thinking about, you won't lash out. Why? Because we're connected through this triangle. And I want everybody to kind of remember it's called the cognitive triangle. The way we think affects the way we feel, which affects the way that we behave. Right? But the thing is, in that triangle, we skip the way we feel a lot of the times. We just go from thinking
the way
to
we
acting.
think. Okay.
We just go from thinking to acting, thinking to acting, acting to thinking, acting to thinking, and we just forget about how we feel. And then we want to bury it. Men are known for that. I know it because I see it in couples therapy all the time. I have backed up evidence. You bury your feelings. Stop doing that. Stop burying how you feel about things. Stop running away from uncomfortable emotions. Stop running away from the things that hurt you. It's okay. Let yourself feel the things that need to feel. Why? Because you will behave differently, right? So this is science. It's a real thing. The way we think affects the way we feel, which affects the way we act. So if you can work on that triangle, you will strengthen your ability to have such a power over yourself and the things that you accomplish that you'll be unstoppable. To conquer, what's that thing Gandhi used to say? To conquer oneself is greater than to conquer thousands in the battle. You can fight everybody around you. But if you don't conquer who you are, you will always be unhappy. Always. Your demons are the things that will chase you. And for a lot of people, it's what chases them to the grave. It's those demons. They didn't conquer themselves. Right? So on the last note, do you have any advice for both immigrant parents, obviously newcomers, or any young immigrant kid, how to kind of navigate those waters? Any tips, any tricks, anything you want to tell them?
Yeah. I mean, like my advice for parents, immigrant parents, is make sure that you show your children, if you want to keep part of who you are and integrate it and not assimilate, make sure that you show your children when they are still young, at 3, 4, 5 years old. Make sure you show them where they came from. Make sure you integrate them from then in the culture that you came from, whether it's taking them back to that country or if it's not possible, bringing it to them in a way in sort of communities and events. Number one. And then my advice also to both parents and the children, again, embrace both. Don't hate either of them. Don't hate the fact that you're not fully from whatever country you're from, your parents are from, or that you're not fully Canadian. Embrace the fact that you're both. Remember where you came from, but don't ignore the fact that you're now in a better country, and view it as a better country. Don't say we're in a worse country now. Always look at it as a better thing for you. God put you here for a reason. Your parents are lucky that they managed to get here, and you're lucky to have been born here. And embrace this. Embrace both where you came from and where you are. That's the number one advice I would give, because otherwise, like for me, it was a struggle when I was in my early 20s, and I overcame it, but it was hard. It's easier if you grow up knowing both and appreciating both. And so this advice really applies mostly to the parents, to the immigrant parents, is make sure you don't ignore these things, and keep your children involved in both. Let them do stuff at school with the other kids. Let them do extracurricular activities. Let them Let them hang out with their white Canadian friends, or with their black friends, or with their Asian friends, whatever. Let them do that. Let them do the Canadian stuff, but also make sure that they know where you came from originally, so that there's an appreciation for both. Ignoring one or the other is just it's not going to end well, and they will struggle in their teens. They will struggle in their youth. And what I find is that the things that happen to you when you're very young, they still do have an effect later on in life.
Absolutely. You're telling me. I know all about it. Absolutely. Those primal years are such I like to call them blueprints. Between the ages of like 0 to 7, you're like building a blueprint like of your life that you will now leave that small world with your parents and your caregivers and the people that were taking care of you on a daily basis. And you want to take that blueprint and kind of go out in a bigger world, because that's when you know abstract thinking and all these other concepts that are much bigger than you than as a kid. My primary advice, I would say, and again, I think it's both for the parents and the kids, is create community. I think that was one of the things that got us through a lot of challenging times. And the community doesn't just have to be, an internal cultural community. It can be people from around the globe. It can be people in church, people in schools, people at your workplace, people like create a community that makes you feel safe, and a community that's going to help you get through challenging times. I think that it's really hard it's a human need, first of all, to not be alone. Being alone is a punishment. That's why prison exists. We're very much social beings. So it is important to create community for your kid, create community for yourself, create community for your family, so that you don't feel like you're going through this alone and that you have to sacrifice parts of yourself to kind of fit into this new place or this new world. Because if you create community, then you can find ways through that community to also integrate into the newer culture. Right. And lastly, like, I think it's okay to fail. I think a lot of the time we come here, we have so much pressure to just always succeed. And I think that we need to adapt our definition of success as immigrants who come here, so that the pressures we put on our children are a little bit different. Allow people to fail and use failure as an example of what it takes to succeed. I don't think you just succeed like that. I think it takes to fall and to be picked back up, and know that when your kids fall, they need you to pick them back up, not to shame them, not to make them feel stupid, not to make them feel worse about it, they need guidance, they need love, they need comfort, they need reassurance. Because when you're there, when they fail, when they succeed, you'll be the first one to run to tell. Right. So that would be my primary two things. So anyways, I really want to thank you, Sylvain, for taking the time to chat with me today about this. It's very important to me, to be honest. I think it's been such a big part of the culture to just be an immigrant here, or at least a second generation immigrant. Yeah. So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. And, I think I've learned a lot from you, although I've known you all these years. And hopefully you learned something from me. So,
definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Leticia.